Danielle Smith has just shown the rest of Canada what it means to have a giant pair of cojones. And Justin Trudeau, well, he's hiding under his bed, scared like a little girl. Let's get into it.
Oh, yeah!
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Fringe. My God, Danielle Smith, God bless this woman. What can you say about a premier that shows she has more testicular fortitude than Justin Trudeau? This is a woman who runs a province, yet she acts like she has the potential to run the country. And I know a lot of people in the comment section have been saying they wish she would. In fact, maybe this is the start of something new. Maybe we'll see Danielle Smith run at some point for a federal job, but let's not worry about that right now. Let's get into the real deal of what's going on in a press conference earlier yesterday, I guess today, by the time you're watching this. Danielle Smith coming out to basically say Alberta's had enough, and Alberta isn't going to put up with Justin Trudeau's antics anymore. What antics are we talking about? Well, the deals that Justin Trudeau has put in several times where he's come to our province in the last little while, unannounced, not even letting premiers or other MPs know that they're coming to the province, that there's deals they're going to be giving to municipalities with strings attached to them. And I don't want to linger too much on the details because we're going to get into it. This is going to be a long one, folks, but it's highly worth it. I recommend sticking around. But my God, what Danielle Smith said about Justin Trudeau, putting him in his place and completely embarrassing and demolishing him. Let's take a listen to what she had to say in her press conference. I'm only going to play a snippet because, again, you can see here, this is a 53-minute press conference, so I'm gonna play her introduction because it's bittersweet, and then we're gonna get into the details. Here we go.
For years now, even though the Liberal government in Ottawa has had the barest of representation in our province, they've been imposing their destructive agenda on Alberta taxpayers. We see this as Alberta Liberals enacting policies that will devastate our province's economy. We see this when they fail to provide Alberta with our fair share of per capita program funding. And we see this when they actively work around us to sign funding agreements with municipalities and provincially regulated and funded organizations that run counter to Alberta's interests and priorities. Section 92 of the Constitution states that municipalities fall within the exclusive jurisdiction of the provinces. The terms could not be more clear or more certain. And yet, as we've come to see far too often, the federal government extends itself too far and interferes in our provincial jurisdiction. And we aren't the only province to see this and be troubled by it. Last November, during our Council of the Federation meeting in Halifax, premiers across the country were united in opposing Ottawa's practice of stepping over our provincial governments to make agreements directly with municipalities. And many of us spoke about pursuing legislation similar to what is in existence in Quebec, which prohibits the federal government from bypassing their provincial government when making deals with municipalities. In fact, the Quebec minister made sure that we all had a copy of that legislation before we left that day. So today, this is no longer just talk in Alberta. Today, we are taking back more of our jurisdictional control and telling Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his cabinet that they cannot make deals without our express approval. And this afternoon, I'm pleased to table the Provincial Priorities Act to do just that. Albertans are uninterested in the virtue signaling from Ottawa and the related strings that come with this. We are interested in our fair share of federal funding to move forward with our priorities on roads, on infrastructure, and on housing. Now, let's be clear, when we talk about federal funding, we mean money that comes from Canadian taxpayers. For much of our recent history, Albertans have paid far more in federal taxes than we get back in federal programs and transfers. Even during the last economic downturn, one of the worst in our history, we were still the largest net contributor to federal finances. And yet we consistently receive less than our provincial neighbours in per capita funding. And when we do receive funding, those federal dollars come with ideological strings attached, offering funding on its own terms, bypassing the provinces, and forcing municipalities to dance to Ottawa's tune, like funding for so-called safe supply, or electric buses that don't work, or solar and wind projects when we need reliable baseload power, or what we're seeing with the games being played over the housing accelerator funds. In other cases, Ottawa ignores programs already in place and wastefully spends on duplicative programs like pharmacare and dental care, when what we really need is envelope funding to expand existing provincial programs that already exist in these areas. Funding for what Alberta's priorities are that we need. Federal interference, we don't. Ottawa should be staying in its own lane. But at the end of the day, I think I know what's happening. Justin Trudeau has said his job is boring. Well, I'll suggest that's because he doesn't actually know what his job is, and therefore he isn't doing it. Because if he were doing his job, he wouldn't have enough time to meddle in my ability to do my job and the ability of other premiers to do their jobs. So here is a partial list of the things he and his government are not doing that they could and should do instead of interfering in provincial matters. He should get rid of the consumer carbon tax. He should fund on-reserve housing and healthcare. He should close the gap in funding for on-reserve addiction treatment for First Nations. He should provide per capita funding for housing and road infrastructure. He should collaborate to build strong economic corridors. He should develop an aggressive plan on international trade to get our natural resources to market, including a strategy to transport hydrogen and ammonia for export. He should bring in the clean energy investment tax credit that he has promised, including for carbon capture, utilization, and storage. He should address public safety concerns resulting from their lenient bail system. He should manage federal finances, deficits, and debt in order to combat the inflation that is squeezing every Canadian today. So if I ran through the full list of things that are in federal jurisdiction that they are not doing, we'd be here all afternoon. But these examples clearly show that Ottawa is neglecting its own responsibilities while meddling needlessly in ours. Albertans don't want federal funding to show the world how virtuous we are or to polish Canada's halo internationally. We want our provincial share of per capita federal funding for roads, for infrastructure, and for housing. Projects that will make a real difference for Albertans. The way we see it, federal and provincial funding should be spent collaboratively, not at cross purposes. And it should be spent on Alberta's priorities and not on Ottawa's, because after all, a lot of that money came from hardworking Alberta taxpayers in the first place. But this federal government has never let reality get in the way of a good headline and never missed an opportunity to grab more control from the provinces. Our government believes Albertans are entitled to their fair share of federal funding and to have that funding spent on priorities that matter to them. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that happens, including through this legislation, which signals that Alberta will act to ensure the Constitution's integrity and that we won't put up with any further manipulation or political interference from Ottawa. And now I'll invite Minister Rick McKeer up to share more.
Wow. Wow. Mic drop on Danielle Smith. I mean, guys, this is insane. The level of fortitude that she has to make these statements. I know it's a long clip. I wanted to make sure she got a couple of good zingers in there, but made some very good points. And I wanted to highlight those so that everybody understands fully where Danielle Smith stands and what is coming next for the province of Alberta. Now, again, I'll have a link down below. This is a 50-minute press conference. So if you missed it, if you want to get more details, I'll have a link to it in the description of the video down below. You can feel free to go check out. Rick McKeer, of course, comes in with some really good zingers against Justin Trudeau as well. But when this was all done, what they essentially said, and I'm going to go over those details again, so buckle up, a little bit of information in this video coming your way. But of course, virtue signaling mayors between corrupt Mayor Sohi in Edmonton and virtue signaling woke failed Mayor Jyoti Gondek of Calgary coming out to show their dismay, as well as Randy Boissonnault as well. I know I'm mispronouncing that name. I can't pronounce his name properly because, well, it's not worth my time. But here's Mayor Sohi. The government of Alberta is not paying their property taxes. That is a $60 million hit to the city's bottom line. Edmonton taxpayers are forced to fill that gap. We are asking the provincial government to reinstate the grant in place of tax program retroactively to 2019, providing the $60 million they owe to Edmonton taxpayers. I mean, this isn't necessarily strictly linked to today's press conference, but you're going to see the push from these mayors come even faster and swifter now that Danielle Smith has said she's essentially not going to sit back and listen to Justin Trudeau's rhetoric anymore. Again, Randy Boysenalt coming in saying, it's my job to help ensure federal programs help us in Alberta. What Danielle Smith announced today is aimed at stopping that. She'd rather hold back municipalities like Edmonton and Calgary than work with Ottawa to solve problems. Now, we talked about the funding of those cities, and we've talked about how it's essentially Justin Trudeau holding a carrot on a stick that if cities bow down, if cities adopt allowing the government to purchase properties to essentially build 15-minute cities within Edmonton and Calgary, then he's willing to give us money. He's willing to provide those things because it's about government control. It has nothing to do with helping citizens. It has nothing to do with making people's lives better. It's all about virtue signaling and 15-minute cities, which is why the rest of the province was left out of Justin Trudeau's money. It was simply just going to cities like Calgary and Edmonton. Now, Calgary woke failed Mayor Jyoti Gondek. Boy, she's a tall glass of water with her statements, but it says Calgary's mayor is weighing in on the idea of new legislation that would prevent the federal government from funding the city without consulting the province first. Failed woke disgusting Mayor Jyoti Gondek is speaking up after Jason Nixon, Alberta's Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services, said last week that the UCP government will introduce that bill. If passed, would mean any funding between Ottawa and municipalities would have to get approval from the provincial government. Similar legislation is already in place in provinces like Quebec. Millions of dollars in housing investment in the city may be at risk if the legislation passes, says Gondek. It's simply going to slow things down. That will make life worse for Calgarians, not better, she says. For a government that talks about cutting red tape and overreach, this is rich. I mean, we're just saying we don't want 15-minute cities, Jyoti. I don't understand the problem. Gondek says she was not consulted about the legislation and says the provincial government needs to stop picking fights with the federal government. Well, if you weren't consulted, then you know how it feels for Danielle Smith to make that announcement because Justin Trudeau just kind of waltzes in here whenever he wants to, unannounced, makes promises, and then leaves. It's kind of like the stepdad who comes in and showers his children with money, pisses off the mother, and then leaves. It's ridiculous. Gondek's mom and dad just want to fight with each other. I'm tired of it, she said. Cities deserve better. What an understatement that is. Get out of your office, Jyoti. Cities do deserve better. She adds the lack of funding for the province is one of the reasons why property taxes in the city have had to go up. No, the city's property taxes have had to go up drastically because of your ridiculous levels of spending and your no limits approach to building and providing things that Calgary doesn't need nor want. Unbelievable. We've covered it in other videos. I read that statement and it just gets my goat. My question would be, are you willing to step in and pay for everything? Are you willing to build the relationships to make sure the money flows to us? Asked Gondek. Because I don't see that happening. Jyoti Gondek shouldn't have any money flowing to her because she's shown time and time again how irresponsible she is. What I see is a government picking a fight with another and refusing to let the city that's in the middle of it actually get the money its citizens deserve and need. No, the citizens deserve fair leaders that aren't installed, that aren't here to post woke bylaws and woke propaganda by brainwashing our children. Ward 8 Council Courtney Walcott also weighed in on the thought of said legislation, calling it an opportunity for the provincial government to get in the way of federal government addressing a crisis. Crisis, by the way, that they created by letting in millions of immigrants. It's really exciting, but they're stepping up, and we have a province trying to slow them down, says Walcott. More details on the province legislation, as it says, will be revealed Wednesday. Now, this was yesterday's article. Of course, they had a preview to what Danielle Smith was going to talk about today, so they wanted to get their 10 cents in. It's disgusting at best that this is the reason why Calgary is the way it is. This Courtney Walcott is another leftist counselor who votes down everything that's reasonable within this city, who doesn't want anything good for Calgary, much like Mayor Sohi in Edmonton. And I know a lot of viewers have asked me to start covering his antics. I'm going to start looking into that because I do have a trail on Mayor Sohi. Believe me, I feel for you, Edmonton. I know how bad he is. But this is why things aren't getting done in Calgary. These people are praising Justin Trudeau for wanting to come in, build 15-minute cities, and dangle his carrot on the stick. Of course, the Calgary Herald is showing here exactly what the new bill is detailing. Under Alberta's new bill, the federal government would have to advise the province of any funding agreement it wants to sign with the provincial entity. Any agreements that do not receive provincial approval would be invalid and akin to breaking the law, according to Smith, though she didn't specify what the penalties would be. Stakeholder engagement will be conducted this summer to determine the regulatory framework, establish an approval process, and determine any exemptions to this legislation. The bill would come into effect early 2025 after the regulations are finalized. This legislation would not be retroactive, meaning the province wouldn't have the power to cancel any existing federal agreements it considers contradictory to its interests. Smith denied that Bill 18 would add more bureaucracy or red tape, claiming it's simply an additional amount of disclosure. And again, I don't see a problem with that. I don't see why any province would want to be consulted before virtue signaling prime ministers like Justin Trudeau want to come in and dangle carrots on a stick and tell other corrupt mayors that are woke and left-leaning, like Mayor Sohi and failed woke Mayor Jody Gondek, hey, we're going to give you all this money and all you have to do is totally destroy the lives of your citizens. And they sit there lining their pockets and going, okay, King Justin, we'll do whatever you ask us to. This is the definitive look at how disgusting politics can get, ladies and gentlemen. It shows Justin Trudeau's further disregard for Alberta. He's not doing anything to help our province, clearly, as he's not doing anything to help this country. Now, Danielle Smith, of course, one of the many premiers to stand up against Justin Trudeau and demand a meeting for explaining and discussing the implementation of the 23% raise of the carbon tax. Of course, he said, well, we had a meeting in 2016 before you were even elected premier, and I'm not going to have that meeting again. He's turned down multiple premiers, while Pierre Poilievre, again, has called out Justin Trudeau to say, why not have a live televised forum with these premiers asking questions if you're so sure of your policies? And I agree. I think that would be the best thing to put Justin Trudeau in place. It would be the best thing to lock down the complete lunacy that comes with this ridiculous carbon tax. But furthermore, I think what Danielle Smith has done today / yesterday, by the time you're watching this, is nothing short of godly. And I applaud her tremendously for what she is doing, standing up for the rights for Albertans. You saw people championing this kind of treatment to Justin Trudeau, like Fat Stalin. Sorry, I always say that. I always get his name mixed up. I don't know why. Jason Kenney, when he said, I'm going to fight the federal government. I'm going to fight Justin Trudeau if you elect me into this party. And a lot of people put him in place because that's what Albertans wanted. And sure enough, Jason Kenney came back and said, well, I wrote him a letter. And if he doesn't reply to that, I'll write him another letter. And that was the end of it. Of course, Jason Kenney was a federalist at best. He didn't want to pick fights with Justin Trudeau. Danielle Smith truly showing that she has Alberta's best interests at heart, and she is going to continue fighting the good fight for Alberta. It would be nice to see other premiers stand up and do the same across this country. I know Scott Moe has been doing it recently. I know Doug Ford has been kind of getting a little bit louder. Again, I'd like to see for Ontario, for him to start really pushing back against the federal government, especially if he wants to keep his seat. But who knows where we're going to end up, ladies and gentlemen, because around and round we go on this carousel. Where we stop, I have no idea, but I will definitely be bringing you the updates. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to click the subscribe button, turn on your bell for notifications. If you enjoyed the content, make sure to leave a thumbs up and a comment down below, as YouTube has been suppressing the hell out of these videos lately. They do not want anything about Justin Trudeau getting out. So make sure that leaving a thumbs up and a comment helps get us out in the algorithm. If you're enjoying, again, leave that behind. Make sure to also join us here Fridays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central for Friday Night Fringe, where we're definitely going to be talking about this. We're going to talk about some other things that happened this week and some back and forth with this great, awesome community that we have here on this channel. Join us live. I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in those streams and hearing what you have to say. And it's definitely the highlight of my week. I hope you guys enjoyed this very lengthy video and have a great rest of your day. I know I will. I'll catch you on the next one.